right now. So, floor is all yours.
Wow, what a hype up. Appreciate it. I hope that everybody isn't in summary disappointed by what I have to show. Um, I I don't know. Do you think that I should give it a couple more minutes to let people trickle in, or do you think I should just roll out?
You have the freedom to get started. It's about like 4 p.m. right now, so we're exactly on time.
All right, I'm going to consider us on time. I'm going to get going. Anyone who's late sucks, and they can deal with it.
Yeah, if anyone
Um,
joins in the middle, just please keep your mic muted. At the end, we'll have time for Q&A and to chat. All right,
yeah, definitely.
let's
I
go.
have no plans today.
I don't have a life either. Likewise.
Yep, perfect.
All right, let's go.
All right, so first of all, I have to say that this isn't going to be quite as polished as I wanted to because I had a very hectic week. Um, so, we're going to keep it chill. It's going to be relaxed. And I'm also going to try to keep my eye on the Discord chat if you have anything to throw in there as I'm presenting. Um, but for my intro, my name's Ben. I'm in my fourth year as a professional designer, technically. I graduated in 2018. I currently work at a leading design consultancy called Frog, where I work as an interaction designer. Um, in the 4 years that I've been a professional designer, I have designed autonomous car interfaces, worked on feature concepts for car interiors and interactions, taught college level design, and just last year is when I left all of that behind and moved all the way from Detroit down to Austin, Texas to start as an interaction designer at Frog. So here is a short preview of some of the work that I am capable of showing. Um, that whole 4 years, though, is really just the short story. I definitely did not just graduate from college and then instantly start working at like a super cool self-driving car company. There's a lot more there that I want to dig into, and there's a lot of learning and luck that led me to where I am. So today I hope to be able to highlight just some of what I've learned and observed around design education from being a student in a lot of different contexts. I started learning design in high school. I went to community college, and then I went to get a BFA. So I've experienced all of those things. And I've also taught design. Um, I want to talk about all the struggles that I had at my first job, learning what it was to transition away from kind of the educational world into the business world and into the world of being an um, actual functional professional. And then I want to talk about transitioning and the terrible misspelling that I made on my slide. Um, but I want to talk about making an impression as a designer, not just to hiring managers, but also to the people around you and a little bit about making an impression on the job itself. So all that said, let's dig into all the crap, mistakes, failed projects, cool stuff, general idiocy that I experienced and the dumb luck that has gotten me to where I am today. So one thing that I'm actually really thankful for is that I pretty much started getting into design immediately in high school when I was 16. I made really, really terrible things in Photoshop on the regular and had a blast doing it. Here are some of my super, super cool posters that I made when I was like 16 or 17. The thing in the middle can generously be called a logo. Uh, I definitely wouldn't define it as such, but when I was in high school, I thought that's what it was. By my senior year in high school, I was spending over 3 hours a day in the design and printing lab, just churning out these unrecognizable Photoshop compositions and absolutely butchering the principles of design and organization. Um, After that, I went on to my local community college for 2 years, and it was actually only by that second year in community college that I first started working in design for the local school newspaper, which was my first exposure to being kind of production focused in design. And it was a really fun time of eating pizza at 4 a.m. while trying to get layouts finished by 8 a.m. so that we could send them to the printer to get it printed on time. I was honestly just really excited to be working in design. And the stuff that I'm showing here is actually the work that I used when I left community college to apply to art school and my graphic design internships. I got my first internship the summer after I completed community college, working for the local Parks and Recreation office. Um, and then in the fall of 2015, I moved to Detroit and started art school. I attended what's called the College for Creative Studies for 3 years. And that was a really formative time for me. Here you can see a lot of the work that I produced during this time, um, not just in getting better at design, but it also really pushed kind of those soft skills of practicing critique, presenting work, and being challenged to really push myself creatively into strange spaces is what I'll say. I have 4 different internships over this time, many of them overlapping with my full-time class schedule. Uh, ooh, I'm out of order here, but this is some of the work that I was doing in my internships. Um, on the top left over here, you can find kind of the newspaper work that I was doing. And then when I was at the Parks and Recreation office, I did some illustration and logo and signage for a disc golf course. Then you can see a lot of the kind of poster work that I ended up doing at, worked at a local ad agency. I worked for a digital publication for a summer. I worked at the marketing department of my college. And then finally, I got an internship at the automotive company that I would later work for full time. So during this time, I experienced a whole bunch of different sides of what design could possibly be and started finding the parts that I liked and the parts that I really didn't like. It ultimately really led me away from this kind of print and brand focus that you can see in a lot of the work here towards interaction and functionality. These big kind of College for Creative Studies posters you can see, that was an internship that I was actually let go from prematurely because I was really struggling to exist in that visual design and kind of decorative space. I really discovered here that my creativity flourished within the constraints of functionality and that figuring out how to get things to work and work well was a lot more interesting to me than the decorative work that I was really struggling with. All right, now I'm back in order. That my junior year, there was a class we did in partnership with a local company called, at the time it was called Delphi, which was about the future of automotive experience. And this is what I ended up producing for them alongside a team of 2 other students. We came up with this kind of interaction concept and actually built and prototyped this functional interactive table that used cubes as their kind of key interaction modality as opposed to using like a mouse or some other type of interactive piece. And kind of my success here is what led me to going to being offered an internship with that company working on more interactive related elements. So I definitely think a lot of times that I'm not entirely sure what would have happened to me if I didn't happen to be in this class at that time, if I didn't happen to kind of catch their eye. I feel like my career could have gone in a completely different direction. I could have been doing completely different things than what I ended up actually doing. So this is definitely one of those kind of dumb luck examples that I talked about, where it almost felt like I happened to be in the right place at the right time to have this opportunity put in front of me. So that was kind of a quick overview of the whole first 7 years of design that happened before I actually became a full-time designer. There's a heck of a lot more that has happened in the past 4 years that I'm going to dig into, but kind of the reason that I wanted to show all of that background and all of that work is that I know for a lot of people the story doesn't completely align with what you're all doing at the moment. in design, we have a lot of career transitioners. We have people going to boot camps. We have people moving into the field from other disciplines. I'm sure that a lot of you are considering and exploring that direction as well. And something that I've really noticed is that a lot of people are really struggling with the motivation after the 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever else it's taking for them to kind of break into the industry and find their success and direction as designers. Um, so I'm hoping that by sharing the fact that it took me 7 whole ass years to figure out what it was that I was doing and actually move into my final like full-time position and become really enmeshed into the industry helps put it into perspective. And for that first job, I definitely wasn't doing anything cool. It was making flyers, making yard signs, mostly that kind of thing for about 3 months for my first internship. The grind is definitely very real, both inside and outside of the educational system. And so I feel tremendously privileged to have been able to get the education and the opportunities that I got. And I also want to point out that people writing Medium posts and making YouTube videos about, getting their cool job at Google after only 6 months of work are probably coming from a position of massive privilege, access, support, and just a whole lot of luck. Um, I think what ends up happening to a lot of people, and I put boot camps here, but it can really go for a lot of ways that you're trying to teach yourself, um, is that you're really, really fired up in the beginning of things. Um, they have this really, really accelerated structure, whether you're self-teaching, whether you're whether you're doing like the Google Coursera course, whether you're taking any other type of boot camp or class. They're this incredibly accelerated structure that is really, really just kind of the start of your journey. Um, I think a lot of people tend to interpret and consider their time through the concept of milestones. Um, and what ends up happening is that you get these really kind of front-loaded milestones that then leave you with no idea about where to go. Um, when a lot of times you're completing a course, you feel like it's this big, big moment in time that should be kind of a transition for you mentally between being in one place and being in the next place. And I found that after you finish that, those milestones just don't line up in the same way. If you think about the fact that it took me 3 years into the time to actually be able to get an opportunity and be able to start making my mark professionally, that is way, way different than whatever, kind of introductory time someone has spent getting themselves into design. But you did the thing, right? You completed a course, you made a project, you did whatever else, and I think again you just feel like you should be ready to transition into a job, and you don't have that same kind of clarity of path because your milestone is coming very, very early in the process. Um, when I was in school finishing my degree, time never felt like as much of a problem. Like thinking back on the fact that it took a total of 7 years is doesn't feel as kind of crazy to me because I was always looking forward to that next future milestone. I was always looking at, oh, I'm going to graduate from this in this time. I'm going to finish that class. It's going to be the summer and that's going to start over again. And it kind of has this like these measurable milestones that are almost pulling you through your career and pulling you forward. Um, and when you're going through a different sort of educational program, you don't get that same kind of milestone. You don't get that same sort of clear idea of the structure and direction that you're going to be able to go in the next couple of years of your life. And just without that clarity, um, I think that a lot of people are really struggling and a lot of people are having a lot of difficulty to figure out how to move forward. Um, so that's the other thing that I wanted to hit on here is that really the only way to move forward is to make shit. Um, a really key part of my educational experience is like all of the work that I showed you guys. And that's just a fraction of all the crap that I was pumping out on a regular basis. From doing little one-off projects to doing multiple month-long things. I think what I see is so many people putting a lot of pressure on each and every project that they make. Um, it almost feels like everyone wants everything to be a portfolio piece or a case study. Um, and the thing is that not everything has to be that kind of multi-month endeavor with a research and a recruit and a journey map and all this iteration and everything else just to kind of end up with a couple of screens that you're putting out. Something I really want to encourage people to do is to just make things without that same amount of pressure. I'm actually a really, and also sorry that we're just sitting on screens for a long time. Like I said, it's not as polished as I would like it to be. But something I'm actually a really big fan of are things like the design prints that are design sprints that are done here at the Collective Studio and sometimes projects like 100 Days of UI, things like that. Like I know that people tend to kind of shit on those types of projects because they consider them to not be real UX. But I think just forcing yourself to like make and iterate in that way is going to improve your skills so much more and so much faster. Because the third thing that you make is going to be better than the first thing you make is going to be a lot better than, you know, or the 10th thing you make is going to be a lot better than any of those things either. So the more that you make, the more quicker and faster and better your work is improving. Um, yeah, not everything you do needs to be a portfolio project or case study. It puts all this pressure on your work to like be perfect and to be ready and to be something that you can use to apply for a job um, and propel yourself forward. But it doesn't actually leave space for you to like kind of make shitty pieces, make bad art, make things to just figure stuff out, explore spaces that you feel unfamiliar with or scared to approach. Again, I just think that when you have only a small amount of work and every work that you produce feels like it needs to be something that's getting you to your next job. It it it's not the best way to think about kind of growing and improving and moving forward in your career. Um, Something that I really experienced in school and taught my own students is that the process of portfolio creation should be a process of curation. What it really should be about is that you being able to look back at kind of a breadth of work that you've already made and then being able to pull pieces out that you think have potential and could use improvement or are good as they are. Um, you can always go back and change things and update things and kind of grab ideas that you feel strongly about and improve them and make them ready and prepared for a portfolio. But you're not going to have that kind of backlog to pull from and improve when you've only done three things because each of those three things took you 3 months or 6 months to make. Um, I think the biggest thing that I would encourage for people who are just learning and transitioning is making quicker and not being as scared about uh, not making things as kind of precise or UXy or following your five step process or double diamond, whatever the heck. Um, I would really, really encourage people to be making things first and then looking at ways that when there are things that stand out to them that seem like they fit what you want to do, that seem like they have potential to become something better, then that's when you know it's something to revisit and to improve and to pull forward and to use for your portfolio. Something I really want to hit at though, because I know that um, I'm very excited about having gotten a degree and I think it was very helpful for me. But the awesome thing about design is that people don't throw away your resume if you haven't gone to like somewhere like Yale or Harvard. The school that I went to is actually not really well known outside of kind of my state and my area in the US. And when I was applying to Frog, I honestly felt incredibly, incredibly intimidated. Oh, also, Lily, I didn't hear any typing noises at all, so you're good. Or maybe I'm just deaf. Um, but the thing is that when I was applying to Frog, so many of my coworkers are from these kind of nationally renowned schools. Like they're from, the RISDs and the art centers and Carnegie Mellon and places like that. But your portfolio and your work speaks louder than anything else. It speaks louder than your resume. Um, speaks louder than your cover letter. It speaks louder than your background and your experience and anything else about you. Having high quality work opens doors for you, and polishing and making sure that you have that you are revisiting pieces and updating and changing and polishing is the thing that will help you stand out from the crowd and to get opportunities. So from that spiel, we will move forward and continue into uh, the first job that I ever got. Truthfully, at this point, I feel like I was still very much of a graphic designer. I had kind of that one interaction-based piece for autonomous cars um, that I was brought in based off of, but that was almost the only experience that I'd ever had doing something that might be considered kind of UX-y. What happened here is that I actually landed an incredibly design immature company. So yeah, you can see that they have 190,000 people, but we had 10 designers split across 3 different time zones. My formal job title was industrial designer, which I definitely was not. All of my coworkers were though. There were about 5 other designers working directly in the studio that I was in, and they were honestly all like above 45 and had never upskilled themselves on actual interfaces and interactions. They were doing all of their interface work in Photoshop, and I started this job in 2018. That is how kind of behind the times they were. No one really knew what they were doing with design, with interface design, with interaction design, with user experience. Like the larger company didn't know what to do with designers, and the designer themselves, I almost feel like didn't really know what to do when it came to design. Um, so it was kind of a really crazy experience for me because I feel like I had these guardrails on for the past 7 years of my life. As I worked my way through school, I always had kind of classes and a process that my teachers wanted me to work through and clear deliverables that they wanted from me. And now I was kind of out of that tunnel and kind of blinded by the sunlight and possibility of what was going to happen. Even my 5 other internships didn't really fully prepare me for where I was, finding myself in this place with a manager who didn't give me any feedback, projects that didn't have any structure, no one who had any idea about how to move forward or improve. It was uh, just a very immature design experience. You might ask yourself, why did I end up staying there for so long? I ended up staying there for a total of 3 years. I just left last year. And the reason that I stayed, if my slide wants to change, is because my postgrad portfolio looked like this. Um, and so if you're looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, wow, where are all the images? Is that site broken? Is this even a portfolio? Would you define this as a portfolio? This is what every single company that I probably sent this to was thinking to themselves when they looked at it. Um, my teachers at school really loved it, so I guess that's why I kept it around so long. They were very kind of conceptually fine arts based. I did get an A on this portfolio. You can consider for yourself how relevant that is, considering that it never landed me a job. Um, but another fun fact is that my wife was also constantly telling me it was crap, and I totally refused to listen to her because I thought it was like cool and unique. So because of this, I ended up remaining an intern slash contractor at the company until about April of 2020. They actually never brought me on full time for the first 3 years that I was there. Um, but I have to say that I am kind of thankful to my old boss for keeping me around because obviously I didn't find anything else while I was there. So a lot of the mistakes and the misunderstandings that I had in this role came because there was just this absolute lack of structure. The design team was both small and it had absolutely no organizational influence. The projects we did were really ill-defined. They got little to no attention. And in this massive company of engineers, I think everybody thought that we were like literally insane. No one understood what we did or why we did it. It honestly felt a lot of times that I was just kind of floating in this void of nothingness, like this astronaut over here, with no idea what was happening or what was going on. For my first project, my manager told me to design a next generation car infotainment system and then just left me in a corner for about 4 months and maybe would check up on me once a month to ask how I was doing and never gave me any feedback other than saying that something seemed cool. Um, I designed essentially this interaction model structure for a mixed modality controlled interface. It does both gesture control and kind of there's a like a physical controller control. The reason that it actually looks so weird is because we had some interesting technology at the company at the time called a um, a dual layer screen, which would essentially split a background in a front layer. Like physically, there were two different screens layered on top of each other, and so you had like an actual legitimate 3D depth to the screen that designs were meant to try to take advantage of. But what was interesting for me is that for this project, because I had no idea what the heck I was doing, I never spoke with actual users. I never had any idea who or what team it was inside the company that worked on gesture technology at the company. Instead, I spent a lot of my time looking at secondary research, reading white papers. I watched YouTube reviews of cars with gesture interaction systems and like listened to YouTubers kind of shit on like current existing systems to see what people liked or didn't like. I definitely spent a lot of time just scrolling Reddit and like reading people's complaints and disagreements about the ways that things were structured. And I also kind of looked at concept systems from movies and projects outside of automotive to try to find inspiration and ideas. Um, the way that I designed this would essentially be to say that I looked at a bunch of stuff and just assumed that this would probably work better, and then was randomly told about a week before I had to present it that I had to present it. And so when I finally showed this thing to my boss's boss, he essentially said, "Thanks, this seems interesting," and then pretty much just threw it in the trash. They never talked about it again. It never came up. No one was ever interested in it or asked me any questions about it. So my thought process at the time that I was presenting it was that, hey, I produced this obviously superior and super cool gesture interaction system with a sick visual design style, and why do they not just see my obvious genius and awesome work and decide to invest a whole team at the business around building it. Like obviously that's how, product production happens. But from a business perspective, uh, the kind of mistake that I made was that there is absolutely nothing that communicated why it should be built. I pretty much just created some useless images to say, here's a thing, but there's no roadmap. There's no idea of how long the thing would take to make. There's no assessment of the resources required, how many people it will take to make it, what they should be doing, if there's any other equipment required, or what languages, or just in any way, shape, or form, how it should be built. Um, no picture painted of how it would possibly benefit the company to bother to invest their time into making this. And this is actually a problem that I ran into a whole lot in my first 2 years working there. And honestly, for a junior designer, these are things that probably senior designers should be helping you out with. Um, but I thought that I could just have ideas that were smart and put them in front of people and try to get someone to agree that they also thought they were smart and would like to build them. Almost my entire experience in the role went a little bit like this. Someone would engage with the design team to kind of get ideas out of us and then barely follow through on them or just completely cut us out of the process and leave us in the dark. We definitely were not treated as a proper product team with any project management or product production, and were mostly used when people wanted to make clients think that we had true design expertise in-house, because around this time everyone was kind of talking about user experience. Our actual division that we worked of was called the user experience division. And again, we had 5 designers to about 10,000 engineers for the user experience division, if that helps put things into perspective. One major success that I had that I absolutely cannot show, but I can talk about. So imagine if there's a really cool presentation here with cool imagery that everyone thinks is awesome. Is that I was involved on doing a pitch to a major automobile client that I wrote and produced all the assets for a presentation that visualized how cars and car interiors would evolve in 2025 and 2030. Fun fact, I was still technically an intern at this point, but I was flown to Munich to present this in front of the board of a major automotive company. And when I was there, I was pulled aside and told to introduce myself as the design lead, which was the point at which I really should have asked for a raise, but unfortunately I did not. Ultimately, I worked a 70-hour week making last-minute changes because management decided to rewrite 50% of the presentation about 3 days before the deadline that we had to send it out. And then I had to fly to Munich 2 days after that and then practice and memorize the presentation. Um, what was really beneficial is that kind of my reputation for making like these weird future-oriented interfaces was really key to helping the whole team get involved and helping me be a large part of this presentation. And my own ability to be able to flex between roles on the team meant that I was the person with the most holistic knowledge of the design work. Um, I both wrote and produced a lot of the content for this thing that I can't show you guys. So I was able to speak to it very easily and naturally when I was brought in. Being a key part of this presentation is the only thing that prevented me from being laid off, along with 4 of the 7 designers that we had, just 6 months after this presentation was done. And then I ultimately did actually get a full-time offer almost a year later when COVID started. So timing-wise, just so you guys know, that was April 2020 that I technically had my first salaried design job after graduating in 2018. So something that really got heavily reinforced for me in this role was how essential it is to be completely flexible. A lot of times as a designer, and especially in this role, what I was doing was taking kind of this really intangible business language and ideas and concepts about what something should be, and then you're actually translating them into something tangible. And a really big belief that I have is that you should have the tools to do whatever the heck is needed to be able to make that transition happen. So in my time working for this company, I did a lot of things that I think a lot of people would not consider to be part of what they need to know to be a UX designer. I would do 3D modeling. I would like scour research papers and pull insights out of them. I would write user stories. I would prototype things in After Effects. I would create printed handouts and pieces to bring forward to clients. I worked on strategic featuring projects. I did a whole deep dive into urban design for about 6 months to talk about future holistic multimodal mobility structures. Worked on client presentations, did user interviews, and worked on like system state flows for autonomous cars. It was a whole crazy really wide variety of different things that I had to do. And I found myself in this world where things are changing really quickly and constantly. Like ideas were getting scrapped left and right. Requirements are changing all the time because no one knows what they want. Um, to me, the faster and the more adaptable you are as a designer, the more you become essential to people in the company. Um, yeah, you really need to be able to execute on whatever it is that people need you to execute on in order to build your reputation to become involved in larger things and structures within the company. So I always say that you want to build trust so that you can build your reputation inside of a company so that you can build better things for people. Um, One of the problems that I had was that I was always really passive at the start of this internship. A lot of the structural problems I was finding at the start were because I just wasn't reaching out to people, wasn't interacting with other people around the company. I didn't have any idea kind of what the structure was and who would be looking at my work or what their viewpoint towards my work would be. This is something I think can be a little bit of an artifact of spending so much time in school. I think that I kind of get used to getting things really handed to me and having the process dictated. And so embracing that independence and showing a lot of initiative in the workplace was really, really essential. Lastly, oh, sorry. Okay. Lastly, one of the things that I am all about is learning to practice failure. So many people are aware of kind of the iteration piece of the design process, and to me, that is the number one most important piece of the process. The only thing that you can try to do to get better at design is be failing and to be failing in a productive manner. During my time working for my first job, a lot of people came to me not knowing what they wanted. Um, and for me, the best way to find solutions is just to make something and to let them learn what they hate about it and come back to you and make you change it. Um, every problem is going to kind of come with your initial ideas and hypotheses about what something should be. And to me, you should just make that as soon as possible and get it in front of someone and let them rip it apart. And then you can know what they want it to be and what they need it to be and improve it so much faster. A lot of people really struggle to visualize the ideas. And as I said before, as a designer, you're kind of translating from concept to product and physicality. And so it can help uncover a lot of flaws in ideas and certainty in how they're executed. So I think everyone should absolutely embrace that. And the fastest way to get the right solution is to just make wrong ones and get them in front of people as fast as possible. So I would say that of everything I've shown, everything bad that I made, all the terrible designs that I've made, were completely essential to helping make sure that the next design I made was better than the last one. All right. I swear we are almost done and we're almost ready for Q&A. But last year was the year that I finally managed to get a not shit portfolio and get myself away from that last job. Again, I'd been kind of applying and interviewing at other car companies almost the entire time, and none of them had shown any interest in my portfolio or my work. At the time, I was spending the majority of my extra time prepping class curriculums and teaching, but I kind of made the decision to focus a lot more inwards and work on kind of changing my working situation to make sure that I was learning more and improving more at design versus just kind of putting all of my energy back out into the community. Ultimately, I really stayed in this role for much too long in an organization that did not respect my work. At the time, two major things changed for me. One thing is that as a person who felt chronically tired and low energy, I found out that I had really serious sleep apnea, meaning that I'd probably not gotten a full night's sleep in about 8 years. And so getting treatment for that has literally changed my life. And then I actually also started getting connected to some of you guys and to the larger community of design and learning about all the ways that the conversation about design had changed and was shifting since the time that I'd been in school. So when putting together a more product-oriented portfolio, I was kind of looked back at my last 3 years of work and just saw an absolute mess. There was so much random work. Very little of it went on to have any impact or influence. There were so many times that I was creating like these half-baked ideas that didn't have any of that business background, that didn't get any buy-in. And any of the work that I did that was kind of more useful or impactful was work that I just really couldn't show. And I also knew that my work was really weird. I didn't come into this with any mobile or desktop screen designs. I'd only worked on automotive UIs. I didn't work in Figma or Sketch and barely even worked in XD. We never really did user research. That's something that's still my greatest skill gap. I mostly relied on kind of secondary research. But all I knew is that I really wanted to get the hell out of the automotive industry because I was sick of kind of being stuck. So the nice thing, why is this? Okay. It was being very stubborn, not going to the next slide. So the nice thing is that I had a lot of work to start to curate from, but I really wanted to be able to figure out what sort of story I could tell about myself. And the things that I decided that I really wanted to show and say about myself were to showcase my familiarity working with advanced technologies, which was a huge benefit from my job. I wanted to get something that felt like a more expected product in there considering how weird and abnormal everything else in my portfolio was going to be, I wanted to put one thing in that at least showed that I could kind of make a more kind of expected functional product solution. But then I also wanted to showcase my flexibility, my knowledge and background in so many different areas of design and just being able to build and be a part of so many different pieces of that. Um, so one thing that I ended up doing is that I reproduced and remade a lot of artifacts to tell my story. I didn't really have a lot of reviews or feedback at my first job, like I'd mentioned. People weren't really coming to me asking why I'd done things or wanting to see progress. They pretty much just wanted to see an end result. Um, so I didn't have a lot of artifacts floating around that actually articulated my process. So my portfolio, I just made them. I don't really think there's any issue with that. I never positioned it as like, I made this thing, and then I made this thing, and then I made that thing. I was more trying to tell the story of um, just the thoughts that I'd had and ideas that I'd had in ways that I'd iterated and, again, failed forward and gotten ideas kind of torn apart and reformatted into new things. The direction that I took for how I presented myself was just kind of leaning into the weird. Um, I definitely had to clean my projects up into a semi-linear story, but trying to show clearly designed process was completely out of the window. I really just went into just articulating all the stupidity that I plunged through and the process that I worked through at my company to try to get anything done because that was essentially my process. I also knew when I was making this that my best chance would be to appeal to someone that's looking for people who kind of think outside of the box and operate outside of the box. Um, I wanted to go somewhere that saw my flexibility as an asset and to showcase kind of the wide variety of problems that I tackled in ways that I thought differently about design. One thing I did is that I targeted my job search really specifically towards energy, toward agencies, because I knew that you're a lot of times have to be really flexible and you're working at the demand of the client, you're working across a lot of different industries and pulling insights from a lot of different places. Um, So by pursuing companies that I thought would really embrace my strengths and not the ones that would reject my weaknesses, I ended up actually having a very brief job search. I spent probably 4 months developing my portfolio, kind of showing people in different design communities like this, got feedback from people on the ADP list, and I ended up only having 15 applications sent out before getting 3 interviews, and Frog ended up having the fastest process. They didn't make me do a design challenge, and they sent me the earliest offer, and they were the company that I wanted to work at the most. So I just told everyone else I was interviewing with that, thanks, and I'm not interested. And yeah, it was very exciting for me to be able to go to Frog. So for other people, I can't guarantee you that just throwing normal design conventions out of the window is the best direction to go. I had the benefit of a work history and a real world experience and working inside of emerging technology spaces. What I do think will help you stand out is to have a unique approach to design, to show that you're making active decisions about what is and is not beneficial to the problems that you're tackling at hand. Um, I really want people to work on more interesting problems that they feel really passionate about, and consider other platforms and form factors and think more widely about what their designs can be. I'll end it here by saying a lot of times when I see junior portfolios, they honestly really bore me. They kind of make me want to fall asleep because they always feel like more of the same to me. And I would encourage everybody to try to push outside of that space wherever possible. Um, and that is it, everybody. At this point, does anyone have any questions?
Wow, thank you very much. That was an amazing presentation. Um,
Thank you.
and you're also very, very creative and imaginative. And I think there's a bit of a difference between designers that come from art schools. Because I know every time that I have like Henry and Benjamin on our server and they show us their work and their process, it's always very different from, a typical UX designer's approach, you know? So it's interesting to get multiple um, viewpoints from people with different educational experiences because you could learn so much from people who went to art school. So yeah, really appreciate you like sharing all the ups and downs and your successes as well. It's really really cool that you shared that with us. But we have questions. Does anyone here have questions for Ben? Or would you like to say something to Ben, maybe to thank him or anything? If you can't use voice, you could also send a text in chat, and I'll just read out your question or your comment.
Yeah, hit me up. I'm a totally open book.
I have one. So you mentioned towards the beginning of the presentation that you kind of had to grind through a lot of the more like decorative sort of design. How essential would you say it is, given that you ended up, kind of moving away from that, as you mentioned, how essential would you say that it is to kind of explore or force yourself through those related
Mhm.
avenues?
Yeah, so I think that's why I always try to hit on the point of flexibility. Um, I just, in my experience, I have found that roles are very loosely defined. And maybe that's part of me working inside of smaller and more agile teams. Um, but I think being able to take whatever problem is put in front of you and being able to address it is something that will kind of showcase you the best as a professional and give people the best idea that you are basically the person that they can come to get shit done, no matter what it might be. You can get some of the most interesting opportunities that way. Um, so I won't say that people necessarily have to like grind out a bunch of visual design, but I think that being able to bring an aesthetic to your work and being able to think about those sorts of problems um, are really essential. And maybe the biggest one, apart from how you show up at the workplace, is just getting people to give your portfolio a second look. I do think that people are incredibly visually rooted and that they take the visual. Fuck you, Andy. Um,
Yeah, Andy says that Comic Sans is like the only font that matters. So
yeah,
clearly he's been,
yeah,
I don't know,
top-notch
insane.
visual designer. Um, Sorry, I'm kind of meandering. Okay, I think the clearest thing for someone who's just looking to break into design is that the visual aesthetic of your portfolio matters the most. Um, People a lot of times will flat out close your portfolio if it doesn't look good enough because it doesn't look like it is of quality and has put the thought and time and effort put into it to be a refined piece. And part of that is um, part of that is just our kind of visual bias as humans.
Okay. Do we have any more questions for Ben? Um, for me, I don't have a question, but I just want to, make a remark about perfectionism and designers because when I went to art school, I went to do two different art schools. First, I went to like OCAD for like a year, and then I dropped out, and then I went to Sheridan for about 2 years. And the program that I was at Sheridan, I was studying like illustration. Very competitive course, but through the 2 years, I learned so much from my professors when they talk about process and when they talk about how it is that we've oriented ourselves to approach creativity. And a lot of us who go into university straight from high school, I didn't come in straight from high school, but some of us in our class that did, um, they were really obsessed with being technically excellent. Like this is not just a problem that is happens with like digital designers, but even like fine artists as well have this issue, especially when you go to school. You want to be technically perfect, and I think it's because of education systems kind of like forcing us to be perfectionists, to be very like paying close attention to details, basically being anti-creative is basically it. If anyone has ever heard of Sir Ken Robinson, he's done like an amazing TED talk on creativity and education, and he's like preaching to the choir about what this issue is. So if you want to know about it, just check that out. But also the thing about designers being very, very self conscious about being perfect, it also prevents them from actually taking action. And like you said, making mistakes, taking risks, because often I think the most highly talented and creative people are the ones that take the most risks. They're the ones that are kind of sticking their head out, sort of like you doing something very different and doing something that's outside of your comfort zone. Whereas a lot of us like to be in the realm of like, I want to be seen as normal, perfect and like everything about the design is like controlled. And that's kind of what you might also be seeing when you see student work, which is you say it's a little bit boring, and I think it's because it's scary to be hugely imaginative and creative. It takes a lot of risk, and I think you have, this might be controversial, but I think you may have to have a personality type to be open to experience and open to being challenged, because when you're wrong, that's when you learn the most, right? And if you're wrong frequently, chances are you're gonna get it right eventually. But the more chances that you take, it's gonna lead you there. So don't be afraid of like being wrong or being ignorant. As long as you're open to getting the facts once it hits you that you're wrong, and you embrace it and accept it and you move on and try again, you will be a better creative person. Doesn't matter if you're an artist or a UX designer, product designer. I think that's like really key advice that you've given, Ben. It's something
Yeah,
memorable.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and I was gonna say I really love your kind of background as an illustrator and that experience, because the thing that showed me that the most was life drawing class,
Mhm.
um, and doing gesture drawings. I think that process of outputting all of these kind of if no one's familiar with that process, what it is that there's the model that just holds a pose for anywhere between 30 seconds and a minute,
Mhm.
sometimes even 15 seconds, and you have to gesturally try to capture the essence of the pose before they move on to the next pose. And so what it does is it forces you through so many drawings that are just going to be absolute shit. Like you have no control over how horrible they're going to look because, again, you have 15 seconds, you have 30 seconds. You can't think and pause when you're making something. And being able to just kind of work through that volume of art lost a lot of that preciousness to it. It made it feel like, oh, I haven't pulled my whole heart and soul into this thing. If it has to change, it's okay. I know it's not perfect. Um, yeah, and so I think just that's why I kind of call out things like 100 Days of UI or whatever, is like just churning out more work. I like to think makes people feel less precious about the work that they made.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, that's one
yeah,
aspect of it too. But also in UX, it's like sketching through Crazy Eights kind of demonstrations is also another way for people to get their ideas out. So that's also another exercise that people can do. If you've never been to art school and you never had that experience, don't worry. There's different types of exercises that are kind of similar where you act on an idea or an impression that's in your head. Because I think the problem with humans is that like we just talk ourselves out of our own ideas. So as soon as you start thinking about something for long enough, you'll be like, well, this is not good enough, and this might not make sense, or I don't think this is gonna work. Just do it, right? Just do it, and
yeah,
once you get it all out there, the next iteration, it doesn't matter how many iterations. You could do 100 iterations. You're gonna get it right eventually.
yeah. I actually just did a product sprint at work a couple weeks ago, like a 1 week kind of nothing to prototype. And I thought it was really, really interesting. Just it almost kind of short-circuited my brain and made me just make like the whole team had to make decisions so quickly and work so quickly
Hmm.
um, that I think it helped to not have to second guess ourselves. I also don't very clearly remember a lot of what happened that week because it was so intense, but it
Mm,
was fun, that's for sure.
okay. Yeah, so I don't know. I always think that whenever we have these talk events, sometimes it's hard to process everything that was said and then come up with like a nice question or a comment to add. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about icebreakers for talk events? Like if we were to host something like this again, would you guys prefer to have like a break or like an icebreaker just to kind of get loose? Crickets.
I'll let people
Okay.
answer that, and
Yeah,
then Kit actually
they're
has
all
a
dead.
question in the
They're all
chat.
okay. Yeah, let's. Oh yeah, there might be something in the chat. My bad.
Yes, no worries.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot that I missed. My bad. So Gabby says, "Thank you so much for sharing your background." She definitely had some questions to ask, and we'll reach out later. She has another quick meeting to go to. Okay, cool. Ruby says, just went to a live model drawing session for the first time in years this week. Fantastic. How was it? How was it, Ruby?
It was great. I think it was probably, I don't know. It's probably been like 5 years since I had done any real like fine art. So it was held at a museum in my city, and went there and drew for 2 hours, and it was refreshing.
That's awesome. I really have gotten out of the loop when it comes to illustration because ever since I left my program, I just completely stopped those habits. But no, glad that you're keeping it up. You're doing better than me.
I was really surprised. I haven't like actually drawn in a really long time, and I was surprised at how well I did. My proportions weren't so bad.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like the last time that I kind of did life drawing was 2015 when I was in community college. And yeah, I just remember it being a lot of fun. I'm going to take Kit's question where he said, how do you deal with professors who kind of punish creativity instead they go to a design school? Um, so I did go through a design program, but they were very kind of focused on fine arts and on being more creative and pushing us outside of their comfort zones. Um, so one thing that's actually very interesting is uh, I had a lot of classmates who also kind of struggled with what the professor was putting in front of them.
Mm.
And I can say that they've gone on to be exceptionally successful. One of my old classmates is now like an incredibly skilled senior motion designer for an ad agency back in Detroit. And he almost never did his homework. Like, I'm not even kidding. But the guy was freelancing when he was a sophomore and like just putting shit out into the world. And I'm gonna call out Andy because I know that he would do a similar thing sometimes as well. Because ultimately what matters is your work. Like I would encourage someone to graduate. Like if you're gonna fail, then make things so that you won't fail. But ultimately what that professor thinks doesn't matter to the extent that it doesn't matter. Like no one has ever asked me what my GPA is. No one has ever factored that into what's happened. I don't think that, I mean, I can't say how much my degree has, like actually having the degree on paper has factored in, but really the only thing that matters is the work that you're making, and what you're putting out into the world and what you're showing companies.
Yeah, and to add on that, there was a, you know, comment about professors being very intolerant of creativity. I've had this experience before more than once, um, especially when I was in OCAD for like my first year. Um, we it has been known between freshman students that some professors have a particular style that they work in that they like and are a little bit biased to. So if you're a student in your design in a different style than what the professor actually prefers, then you might not be understood. The professor might think of your work as not being as creative or, you know, as compelling. That happens. You can't control what professors say or think about you. There are definitely times where I've experimented in my drawing class. I actually brought in uh, paintbrushes and graphite, and that pissed her off. I don't know why it pissed her off because I was just doing this in my sketchbook. It wasn't really what I brought out um, for our assignment or our lesson. I just did it on the side, and she saw me doing it, and she thought that I was being an absolute fucking moron. Like, what the fuck are you doing with a jar of graphite and, you know, paintbrushes? Like, this is the wrong way to be creative. And I've seen artwork before in galleries where people would use graphite powder in such unique ways. I just saw that and I just thought I really want to freaking try that because it's such a unusual process. But yeah, like I've had professors before who just openly disparage me and literally um there isn't much that you could do because and again, depending on which kind of school that you go to, you don't want to escalate matters where you start a confrontation with a professor. You can get into a lot of trouble for that. So again, keep your head up high, know yourself, and don't take grades too seriously in art school. Trust me, I went crazy fussing over grades. And just as Ben says, in the real world, it really just does not matter. Um, I mean, I dropped out of my course twice, so I know for a fact that like I've been working professionally for like almost 8 years. Uh, the degree doesn't matter. If you work really hard though, and I really stress this, you really gotta try, and it's gonna be really stressful. I think that's probably gonna help you way more than just a piece of paper. But that's just my opinion.
Um, I have two more kind of opinions to put in, both as someone who has taught before, and has taught in multiple classes, and as someone who was also very kind of grade focused in in my school, and I came out of school with very high grades. Um, and I feel like it kind of taught me some bad habits that I had to unlearn. Like again, that failing forward process was really something that I internalized a lot more at my first full-time position than I did at school. And I almost felt like being in the workplace gave me more room for failure in some ways, depending on timelines than I had when I was at school. The other thing is that as someone who has taught before, um, a lot of times where the professor can be coming from is that, at least in my experience, teaching feels very high pressure. Like I felt like I never had enough time to teach people what they needed to know. I felt like the students were not going to be able to move on successfully, and it would be my fault for not being able to teach them properly if they weren't able to kind of execute to a certain level of quality or be able to show their mastery of certain skills. And like I didn't want people leaving my class unable to do what I felt like they needed to be able to do to find success in the industry, um, and to not be able to find jobs and pay back their loans and like pay their rent at the end of the day. Like that for me, that was something that was very much at the front of my mind when it came to approaching how I was teaching. Um, and so I guess I would just say that I think a lot of times like a professor cares. They just have different opinions than you about what something should be and what something is. And when you're managing a whole bunch of different students and very stressed out about what all of them are doing, um, it can be rough out there. And then you can also get a lot of kind of top-down pressure from structures above you and from like department heads about what you're teaching and how you're teaching it and what assignments you're giving and stuff like that. So it's definitely not an easy position for anyone to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
I would just say I felt responsible for people's careers in a way that was a responsibility that I took very seriously.
mm,
And I could definitely see occasions where it may have led to like being more rigid than I would like to be. As someone who actively tries to not be rigid in all aspects of my life,
mm-hmm.
um, having that level of stress, I feel like in some way it made me a little bit of a different person sometimes.
I see. So how were you with grading students? Were you really, really strict?
It depended on the class. When I was grading the portfolio classes, I was pretty strict because I felt like they were about to graduate. So I
Yes,
would
so
grade them based on what I thought was professional or not,
yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
But before that, I tried to leave a lot of room for exploration, and base it off of their work ethic and how hard they like what they were investing into the class, even if the returns weren't to the quality that I would want someone to be. If they were invested and seemed like they were trying very hard, then they could almost always get a better grade than if they had the same quality of work as someone who was not very invested in the class, then they would usually get a better grade because I think effort has a lot more ties to success than quality.
Okay, and I think there's another message from Andy here. He says, also to Musty's point, you can learn to compromise better, to be in a position to deal with that in the future because school is definitely not going to be the only place you'll experience it. Clients and stakeholders also cause the same problems at times, but I wouldn't do that to the point that it's detrimental to your personal development. Yeah, I like that comment. I think it's true. However, I would also have to say, when I dropped out of school twice, I definitely felt like I had to be pressured to conform and I would rather like do things my own way. And from working with clients, by the way, most of my clients have been beautiful to work with. Um, I'm lucky to say that very few clients are going to be ignorant, intolerant, and not listen to you. Sometimes you might be in a position where you're going to be challenged and you will have to like communicate and understand the viewpoints of your stakeholders, and everyone else who's invested in this company, as well as like give yourself a chance to have your ideas understood and known. However, like experiences that you have in life, like school, is not gonna like prepare you for the rest of your life. Even when I was in school, I was told like the first 4 years is gonna be outdated. As soon as you're graduated, everything that you've learned is like it's not gonna be relevant in the future. So you might go into school thinking that you're going to be ready for real life, but you're not. So it just helps to just be open to experience. Maybe not expect things to be a certain way, but when you're up to the challenge, just do your best. Like, just do your best, believe in yourself, and I don't know. I don't know what else to spin to it, but Ben, I'm pretty sure everything you said here was pretty much, like, explanatory of what we should be. Be unique. Yeah, that's the message.
Yeah, I'm leaving this up here for a reason. Be talented, be unique, do cool shit. Literally every single time that I meet with my manager at work, he's like, "What are your career goals?" And I just tell him that my only goal is to make cool shit.
Simple. Simple and sweet. Doesn't need to be more
Yep, doesn't need to be
complex.
more complicated than that. I
Hmm.
just want to make dope work, and that's my only motivation.
All right, you're getting trophies from the audience. My gosh. Alrighty. Yes, it is 5 p.m. and yes, we are like 7 minutes over time, but it's okay. We had a good session. I'm happy that you guys all decided to join us and to listen in on Ben's presentation. Ben, do you have any final words?
Um,
Like, how can
Not
our
I feel like
members? Oh yeah, go on.
what?
Go on.
I was just gonna say I feel like I gave my final words like a minute ago.
Oh, sure. Okay, I thought if you wanted something else to say, but like if for our audience though, for some of you that wants to follow Ben, Ben, is there like a way that they could follow you or keep in touch with you if they
Oh
want to
yeah,
see your work?
totally. So here I'll drop my LinkedIn and I'm happy to chat with anyone. What's my Patreon? I do not have a Patreon. I do not want any of your guys' money. Um,
Oh, we'll
that's
we'll
definitely
happily we'll happily take it on Ben's behalf. We'll take his
that's
your money.
definitely
Yeah.
a thing for me. Yeah, sure. But yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I honestly I do this kind of thing because I really like trying to help other people and give people more access and visibility into what's going on in the organization. Thank you everyone so much for showing up and listening to me blabber on for a solid hour. I appreciate all of you.
It's all right. I appreciate the ramblings. All right. See you guys later. Have a good weekend. Have a good Memorial week.